Hi everyone and welcome to this drawing video. In this video I want to show you how to draw a fox. In terms of the supplies I used a mechanical pencil with HB leads along with a regular 6B pencil. To blend the shading I was using blending sticks, and I also used a small eraser to add some highlights and details. Also the paper I was using was smooth Bristol board. But please don't worry about the art supplies you're using. As long as you have any pencils and any paper in front of you, you'll be able to create something similar. There are no specific requirements. As you can see, I started off by sketching some guidelines, and I drew a vertical line at the centre. Then I placed a horizontal line to help me align the fox's eyes. From there, I started drawing the first eye. And from a front view, the fox's eyes are quite elongated at each corner, and they also have a slight angle inwards down towards the nose. After drawing the first eye, I could measure it, which then helped me place the other one, because in this case a fox's eyes should be just over 2 eyes width apart, and at this point, if my vertical line was off centre, I could then erase it and move it to the right place, so that it could help me with the symmetry later on. And then a fox's pupils, I should also mention, are quite elongated and narrow. If you take the distance between the eyes and then you flip that vertically, starting from the bottom of the fox's eyes, that's where you can start adding the top of the nose. And I continued to use a bunch of guidelines through this process. I highly recommend using as many guidelines as you need. They always help me so much with this kind of process, keeping the symmetry, and especially at this initial stage. After this, I sketched the fox's mouth, adding some faint outlines and then angling them inwards towards the inner corner of the eyes. Then I continued adding some rough outlines, figuring out the fur placement, and also outlining the outer edges of the fox's face, being careful not to add any especially dark pencil lines, because I wanted to be able to add some highlighted fur over the top of that later on, and I wanted to make sure I could add lots of fur to this drawing. I continued roughly sketching outlines all the way to the top of the fox's head, and then I added the huge ears. And I think in terms of their measurements, they are kind of equal to the distance between the top of the fox's eyes and the bottom of its mouth, so they are really massive in comparison to the fox's face. And then this is where the sketch actually starts to look a lot more like a fox. With the sketch completed, it was then time for me to start working on the shading. And for drawings like this, I always prefer to start working on the eyes first, as I want them to stand out as much as possible as the most prominent feature of the drawing. So for each eye, I started off by adding some extremely dark shading to the outer edge and to the pupil. Then I also made sure to mark out a couple of highlights that I wanted to keep so I didn't add shading over the top of them. Then I added a bit of mid-tone shading to the rest of the eye. Then I blended that with blending sticks. From there, I continued using the sharp lead of my mechanical pencil to add some smaller details, and along with that I used my small eraser to add a few highlights and details where the light is bouncing off the eye. For the nose, I added a lot of dark shading using the 6B pencil, but I made sure to leave some highlighted outlines so that I didn't lose all the details. And I also left a little highlight on top, again to show the light reflecting off it. For drawings like this, I like to keep the details at the centre of the face very sharp, mainly relying on my mechanical pencil. And I also like to add a lot more contrast in this area as well. And then as I work my way outwards towards the outer edges of the drawing, that's where I like to blend and blur the details slightly. And I really think this is a nice way of making sure the details of the fox's face stand out even more. At this point, it was time for me to work on the fox's fur, starting with the short fur along its nose. And my process for drawing fur is to start off by adding random quick fine strokes with a sharpened lead. And then once I've placed this first layer, I then use blending sticks on top of it. And then once it's been blended, that's when I use a small eraser to then add another layer, using the small eraser in the same way I would use the pencil to add the random quick fine strokes. And then I continue the process in the same area a few times to create a nice layered effect. Whenever you're drawing fur like this, I highly recommend not to worry about the line placement or trying to draw it in any exact way. It's great to have some reference photos in front of you, but I don't recommend to try and copy the fur exactly because your drawing will end up looking a lot more awkward and a lot less natural, and the process will also take a lot longer as well. Using this process with the random quick fine lines with a pencil and having a relaxed hand, it will help you so much with your fur drawing. I really believe in it. The process has helped me so much. For areas like the fox's mouth, I added a light area of shading first with blending sticks, and then I used the small eraser to add the fur on top. And another great way of adding more depth to your drawing is to add some darkened shading first, like you can see inside the fox's mouth, and then I used the small eraser to add fur overlapping that area. It's a great way to add a layered 3D effect. Then I just continued adding the fur up and around the fox's eyes, making this fur a bit darker and longer. So just increasing the length of the random fine lines I was adding with the pencil, using the same process with the blending sticks and the eraser to build up the layers. For the white fur on the lower half of the fox's cheeks, I added pale shading first, using the blending sticks, and then I continued using the small eraser for the white fur. Then it was time to start adding the long fur around the top of the fox's head, and as I mentioned before, I wanted these details to look a bit more blurry, so that it kind of draws the focus to the fox's face. So I used a softer 6B pencil to add the layers of fur. Again, continuing to use the same method with the blending sticks and the small eraser. And it's a really fun process when you get into it, just building up this nice layered effect. Eventually, it was time to work on the fox's ears, and I started off with an extremely dark outline of fur, and then I added some blended shading towards the centre. Then after that, that's when I relied on the small eraser to overlap all the fur in front of the ear. It's a fun and simple way to add this effect. Getting towards the final stages of this drawing, I decided to add a small mid-tone background, blending it with blending sticks, and then by doing that, it actually meant I was able to add some highlighted fur around the outside of the fox's face with the eraser. Then after that, I added some whiskers with the sharp lead of my mechanical pencil, and I just continued to refine the drawing, sharpening some details around the eyes and nose. Then after that, this drawing was completed, and overall it took about 3 hours to complete, and it was so much fun and so relaxing to work on. I love drawing animals, and I really hope this video has helped out in some way. So please let me know what you think, and also let me know if you have any suggestions for future videos. If you want to see more stuff like this, then feel free to subscribe, and any likes or shares on this video, they really mean a lot to me. If you want to follow my progress and see photos before I post these videos, then please check out the links in the description box below to check out my Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. And once again, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for the support. I truly appreciate it, and I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you all soon.